Let's continue here on BOXTOROW. You see him right there, joined by a gentleman, no stranger to the program, Stephen A. Smith, the one and only, the book Straight Shooter. It's a New York Times bestseller. He is all over the place. He joins us once again here on BOXTOROW. First of all, Stephen A., congratulations on the success of the book, all of your successes. Welcome back to the program.
And I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So, what struck me from the very beginning, I've got a good relationship with my father, my children, particularly my sons. I think I have a good relationship with them. I think they would think that they have a good relationship with me as well. That dynamic struck me seriously right here. When you were talking about that and writing this, did it bring up some things that maybe you had tried to sort of put behind you a little bit?
No, it had always been at the forefront of my mind or the back of my mind, whatever way you want to, whatever verbiage is correct. I've always been mindful and cognizant of it. I would tell you that my sisters were definitely affected by it because before anybody saw the book, they did. And to read stuff about what transpired, they remembered. But they had buried those memories decades ago. And so for it to have to be brought up again, it was very, very painful. They didn't talk to me for like 2 weeks, but I didn't realize that they weren't mad. It's just that it was so devastating to recall some of those memories, some of the things that we had to endure as a family. I wasn't the only one that suffered. I was the youngest, so someone could easily argue I suffered the most because I was the youngest and I was exposed to it at an earlier age than the rest. But nevertheless, it was what we endured together as siblings. And so to bury those memories for so long in terms of the detail, they were taken aback and awestruck at the fact that I had remembered so many things that they had forgotten. And when it was brought up again, it resurfaced. It was a lot to deal with as a family. I can tell you that.
Seemed like a complex relationship in some respects, because while you mentioned, him not, being there but not being there, I thought, that was mind blowing. But at the same time, to your point, you guys watched baseball games, you did some things together. Seemed like a complex relationship.
It was to me, it wasn't that complex. He was in the house drinking his Budweiser, eating his pork chops, watching games. And so if I wanted to watch sports, that's where I had to watch it at. And that's how that happened. But that was all that happened. Nothing else between he and I had never really, really transpired. And so it wasn't complex to me. I would tell you that in a perfect world, believe it or not, you almost would have preferred that your dad is gone rather than be there but not be present. Be there, be gone 5 days out of the week, come back and all of this other stuff. And constant emotions having to be resurfaced over and over again because my mother had to deal with so many things that she had to deal with, and the residual impact affected all of us. And so sometimes you just find not being malicious or vicious in any way or even uncaring. You're just thinking about closure. If he was gone, there would have been closure. Over the decades, we never had closure because the situation constantly had to be revisited.
So let me also talk about, I got my M on for Morgan State. I know you're a Winston-Salem State guy. And I know we've talked about this. I've talked about this with you before, but sort of in passing about your relationship, A, with Big House Gaines, B, with Winston-Salem State University, which you talked about in depth, not only the relationship with Big House Gaines, but also you talked about having to go home, come back, the teachers that really cared for you at Winston-Salem State University. You didn't realize how much they cared for you. Speak to both of those dynamics, Big House Gaines, the relationship you had with him, and then Winston-Salem State University as a whole.
Well, Coach Gaines was clearly a father figure. He's a legendary coach. I didn't know much about HBCUs until I got there, until I got to try out in front of him. But doing my research on him and learning how he assisted in integrating the sport of basketball and what he sparked and spearheaded during the civil rights era, including winning a national championship at the back end of that with the great Earl DePro Monroe. His record speaks for itself. deified in the minds of many in the basketball community because he's such a legendary, iconic figure. But to me, he was also a father figure because we talked all the time. We'd sit in his office. We'd talk about a lot of different things, and he'd educate me about life and about what I needed to do to succeed and how I shouldn't expect compassion. I shouldn't expect but so many people to give a helping hand to somebody that wasn't willing to help themselves and put forth their due diligence in order to be all they could be. So he was definitely about the bigness of accountability, understanding what came with that. And he was big on that. In terms of the professors, obviously the professors were great to me. And what you're alluding to in the book is the head of the financial aid department, Mr. Theodore Heinzman. He was an individual that I loved dearly. And, he had this perpetual smile on his face. It drive me crazy. It didn't matter what was going on. He was always smiling. And this one time he didn't smile at all. And it was when I returned to school after quitting and leaving school for about 8 months. He didn't know if he would ever see me again. I had never said goodbye to him. I just quit because I was depressed because I was going to have to forfeit my basketball scholarship because I cracked my kneecap in half and I couldn't play basketball, and my mother's insurance, because it was a D2 school and they didn't have the facilities that you have at the big D1 programs. In order to get rehab, I was going to have to go back to Queens, New York to get rehab. And because her insurance wouldn't cover me in North Carolina. And so knowing that I had to leave school and whatever, I was incredibly, incredibly depressed about that. And I said goodbye to Coach James and I said goodbye to my girlfriend at the time. And that was it. And so when I came back months later after rehab, ready to, just revitalize whatever career I thought I had, Coach Gaines didn't look too pleased to see me and sent me to Theodore Heinzman. When I went to Heinzman, he was very rude, very dismissive, didn't want to say anything, and that was totally out of character for him. Never saw him treat any student like that. So much so that it propelled me to wait in the back of the building for him like 5-6 hours later when I knew he'd get off of work to ask him why he treated me like that. And he tore into me and talked about why did I quit. He said the second you was preaching us about you wanted to be more than just a basketball player. And the second you thought basketball was taken away from you, you quit school. He said he had an academic scholarship waiting for me, but I didn't return his calls. I didn't answer his calls, so I didn't know. And he was like, you quit on me. You quit on these professors. You quit on this school. And I never in my wildest dreams thought you'd quit on yourself. But that's what you did. He said, I'm ashamed of you. I'm ashamed to know you. And it was, I think that, I'm 55 years old and, I can count on one hand in my adult life where I've cried. And that was one time I cried. I cried in front of him because I was that ashamed of everything that he was saying because I knew he was absolutely right. And I realized that I had disappointed in him. I had let him down. And I had let a lot of professors down and I let Coach Gaines down. And so that really, really had an impact on my life and reminded me of the importance of commitment and just doing what you say you're going to do and making sure that, the people who looked out for you, you strive to the best of your ability, never to forget them and what their purpose is in your life.
The one and only Stephen A. Smith joins us here on BOXTOROW, the book Straight Shooter, available now. You got to go and pick it up. In the book, so we hadn't talked about this, but in the book, you sounded like an all-star basketball player, right? Like your path to Winston-Salem State from what was it, New York Institute, the Fashion Institute. Man, you were a baller, man.
No, I could ball, but I certainly didn't have a resume that said it. I didn't play until my senior year in high school. I dropped 27 points at a tournament at Fashion Institute of Technology, which is what compelled them to come to me. They offered me a partial scholarship. I went there. We were in junior college. We were ranked 15th in the nation at 35-4, but I was still coming off the bench for that. And then I left after 1 year to go to Winston-Salem State University. And when I went to Winston-Salem State, I cracked my kneecap in half. I tried out for the team because a former player, the Harold Funny Kit, had brought me down there. And when he brought me down there for the tryout, I hit 17 straight three-pointers. And I was signed to a scholarship on the spot. And once that was over, I never shot like that again, as Coach Gaines always reminded me. I never shot like that again. So you got people that, They could ball, but they don't necessarily have the resume because they didn't stay there long enough or they didn't put themselves in position. In my case, injuries plagued me, playing on the hard cement, concrete in New York City. I came down in Winston-Salem with chronic tendonitis in both of my knees before my kneecap split in half. And so I never had an opportunity to really showcase what I could do, but I could ball. That was true.
As someone who always says you don't like to get in people's personal business, you shared yours in this book. Was that difficult for you to do that?
Difficult, but necessary. And the reason why it was necessary is because of the chair that I sit in. Make no mistake, I didn't tell everything about my life. There's a lot about my life that nobody ever has heard about or nor will. But what you choose to reveal, you got to come full throttle with it. You got to be real in terms of your upbringing, in terms of what I wanted to utilize the book. First of all, the title of the book is dedicated to my mother, God rest her soul, because she was definitely a straight shooter. But also in writing the book, I wanted to accomplish two things. I wanted it to crystallize what my childhood was like and what level of adversity I went through to get to where I am. But I also wanted the book to help shape and formulate for any reader out there why I am the way that I am in terms of accountability, the opinions and perspectives that I have, why I've come to be the way that I am, what I endured that shaped and formulated this persona that is me. Who am I? And I felt that you and everybody else out there had a right to know that, because I sit in a chair every day where I'm on live television for at least 10 hours a day in judgment of the things people do. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew where I was coming from. But they also understood I don't get personal. I might have personal feelings and I'll be honest about it, but that don't mean my commentary and my dialogue is personal. That's why I make sure I put it out on Front Street so everybody understands exactly where I'm coming from, who I am, and they can trust that I feel this is who I am. I'm not putting on any pretenses.
Let me talk a little bit about Quite Frankly, because I can relate to what you're saying with this show, been on the air 17 years. You made a great point. At the beginning, it was about the guests, and I feel you. And then to the point, it needed to be more about you. And I totally get that. First of all, who's the NASCAR driver the brother that you had on, because you had him on your show? I wouldn't got him on my show. What was the brother that?
What you talking about, Hamilton?
No.
Who it was.
This was back in like 2007.
I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Okay.
I forgot.
Yeah. That's okay. I was just, right. I couldn't remember his name.
Right.
But yeah, can you kind of speak to that and really being able to establish who Stephen A. Smith was, opposed to, like you said, kind of having the guests kind of be the main part of that show, Quite Frankly?
You got to pay attention to who the audience is and what they want from you. No matter what guest I brought on, no matter what success I've had with guests that I brought on my respective shows and what have you throughout the years, the analytical data that repeatedly comes back is that the audience wants to hear from me. They don't care to hear from these other people as much as they hear from me. And so I got to give them me. And when I was doing Quite Frankly, I wasn't doing that. The first guest was Allen Iverson, and obviously I had Prime Time. I had Michael Irvin. I had Keyshawn Johnson. I had Joe Montana. I had everybody pretty much, but Tiger Woods was on his way. I had Kobe and Shaq and everybody like that. And they were all planning on coming, on the show, like, Tiger Woods and others. At the end of the day, no matter what guest I had on, it was always about Stephen A., what you got for us. And so that taught me, to make sure that I deliver on the goods when it comes to me, that whatever the audience expects from me, that's who has to show up today. And that's what I've committed myself to doing.
Two last thoughts. One of the most entertaining things I've seen on TV, Wednesday, when Mad Dog comes on, that is must-watch television, the banter between you and he.
Right.
I see the mutual respect, as much respect as I know you have for him. It seems like when he's on the show, your game raises to a level it doesn't raise to when everybody else or anybody else comes on. And when you're talking, I can see sort of the admiration that he has for you. Speak to you all's relationship.
Well, first of all, I think that what I bring is consistent. It don't matter who the hell is on the air with me. I'm going to do me. Whether it's Michael Irvin, it's Keyshawn, it's anybody else. But I'm proud of all the contributors and the good job every single one of them have done, because they've helped make First Take what it is today. We've been number one for 11 years. But these brothers and sisters, both white and black, that come on First Take as contributors every weekday, I got to tell you, it's the most fun I've ever had doing First Take in my life. I've never had more fun than I have now doing First Take. But Mad Dog Mad Dog's something special, man. And it's like people don't realize, first of all, he's in his 60s. He's got the passion of a 20-year-old. He's an historian because he's been to most of these places and covered most of the things we only read about. This man is approaching his 40th year in radio. He's a Hall of Famer, just inducted into the Hall of Fame. And so, to me, I wanted the audience to know this is the kind of folks Stephen A. welcomes to First Take. I'm the executive producer now. So, obviously I have a lot to say as to who's going to appear on the show. And to see somebody like Mad Dog, listen, his knowledge, his perspective is different than mine. First of all, he's more knowledgeable because he's literally experienced more. He was in the business covering events when I was in high school. Okay, so we have to remember that. Then second, he's been doing radio, and he had the #1 radio show in America for the better part of 2 decades with Mike and the Mad Dog, Mike Francesa. So that was a component. Coming on First Take, you had people, they didn't know who the hell he was, bro. This was so hilarious. Yeah, Kendrick Perkins, who the hell is this dude talking this junk to us? Where did he come from? All that stuff. And I was like, you ever heard of Mad Dog Radio, the channel? It's his. They didn't know. They didn't know what an iconic figure, because all of these years he was on radio. He was never on television. So they had no idea. And, you got football and basketball analysts. They ain't watching High Heat on the MLB network. They don't know about him on baseball. All they're like, who the hell is this guy? And I'm like, that's Mad Dog. That's the legend. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, because even though I get on him because it's so much fun, I love the element that he adds. I love for middle-aged white folks that have been listening to him for decades to know that he can be made to be relevant to this generation of viewers who are watching, because he brings a level of expertise and passion that can match any genre. And I just think it's important. It was important to do that. And part of doing a show is understanding that every minute of the show, you don't have to be the show. You can facilitate others being the show. Michael Irvin, his Playmaker segment. Me with my A-list, and Keyshawn and Mina Kimes and them getting at me. Mad Dog with his What Are You Mad About segment and other things that he brings forth. Dan Orlovsky with his board and dissecting football, and Swagoo, Marcus Spears, and Ryan Clark with their expertise. You can facilitate others being a show within the show. That's what it's all about. It's about sharing that wealth. That's what teams do. And we are definitely a team.
Last thought, and I like, you're right, because I like you. I like Mad Dog. I like all of them, but particularly my favorite, Mad Dog and Michael Irvin. You and Michael Irvin are great.
No doubt.
Yes. Last thought, mentoring, to the point. A lot of the guys, Ryan Clark, et cetera, call you big bro. Speak to mentoring these guys and bringing guys along in this business.
This doesn't last forever. There's a period at the end of every sentence. At some time, no matter how successful you are, everything comes to an end. And in the end, true success is when you have successors to point to. Successors that you facilitated being successors, because they knew you wanted them to succeed every bit as you wanted it for yourself. And when I look at Marcus Spears, when I look at Ryan Clark, when I look at the Playmaker, who's like a brother to me, I look at all of these guys and ladies, Kimberly Martin, Monica McNutt, Molly Karam, all these folks. It's my sincere hope that when my ride ends, I'll get a big hug and a big thank you for what I tried to do for other people when I was at the top. Because that's all you have to lean on at the end of the day, bro. I mean, I plan on being successful for years to come, but it ain't gonna last forever. And you know, when my day comes, when it's the end of the road and it's time for somebody else to be in my seat, in my chair, you know, it's my hope that whoever that person or those people are people that knew I cared about them and believed in them to help them get to this place where it's all right for them to replace me, you know? And so that's how I look at it. And, you know, they are brothers to me. I love Ryan Clark like a brother. He does his Pivot podcast. I think he's doing a sensational job with Fred Taylor and Channing Crowder, Swagoo, Marcus Spears. That's my little big bro as well. Kendrick Perkins. That's another dude. I love him to death. Of course, the playmaker Irvin Keyshawn has been my brother for decades. We've been tight. We are road dogs. We roll together. That's my man, and the whole bit. And I just want, you know, it doesn't have to be First Take. It could be something else. It could be anything. It's just very, very important to me that they succeed. It's very important to me that all the names that I mentioned end up successful, because without them, First Take wouldn't be what it is. I couldn't be in this position if they didn't bring what they brought. And I'm in turn, especially after Max Kellerman departed and what have you, I couldn't thank them enough for what they've done for me. And so to me, the least I can do is do everything that I can to ensure that they're successful, every bit as successful as they've made me.
Get the book Straight Shooter by the one and only Stephen A. Smith, in stores now. Joins us here again on BOXTOROW. Stephen A., appreciate the time. Thank you for doing this. Continued success in all you do.
Man, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, my brother. I like that sweatshirt, by the way, Morgan State. I feel you on that. I like that. It's pretty fly.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Big house games. That's right.
That's right.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.